Hello all, Alison here. Welcome back to Words and Pictures for a few minutes of fun. As you can probably see, we're going to be having a few minutes of fun doing a little bit of ink swatching today. Applying the ink in, I think it's at least 5 different ways just to get the measure of how those inks respond when you apply them differently. Just a little bit of admin first of all. YouTube have been sending me messages about a new way that you can support the channel, which is if you click the thumbs up, you are going to be offered an option to hype the video. Not a word I'm very fond of, but yeah, apparently there's going to be a way that you can give an extra recommendation to others, and that will help the video spread more widely. So if you're leaving a thumbs up on the video, if you've enjoyed it, none of this is compulsory, and you are offered an option to hype the video, then I'd be very grateful if you would consider doing that, and hopefully we can invite more people along for the creative journey here. Having said that, it seems like quite a good time also just to remind you of the possibility to also support the channel via Buy Me a Coffee, linked in the description below. If you are enjoying what's going on here, you can buy me 1 cup of coffee, 10 cups of coffee, or you can become a regular supporter, creative supporter at various levels, bronze, silver and gold, which get you little extra bonuses on a monthly and or quarterly basis. So that's admin out of the way. Let's have a look at some inks. So I went earlier this year to Holland, to the Netherlands, and did some demoing at the wonderful Art Specialty show for the HobbyStudio, which is a craft store based in Holland, one of the PaperArtsy stockists, so you can absolutely get my PaperArtsy stamps there. And they got in touch to say, would I like to have a play with some new inks that they are stocking? Well, of course, I'm always happy to play with ink. So these are some oxide inks, which are distributed by a Dutch company. So it's a product available to those of us who are in Europe, and yeah, they are really fun to play with. They sent me a selection of colours they thought I might enjoy. Can you guess? Blues, greens and neutrals, with a little touch of yellow for summer sunshine. And yeah, if you follow me on Instagram, you will have seen some of these swatches already. So yeah, just having a little play, getting to know these oxide inks. But I was also quite curious to do a little bit of direct comparison with some of my much loved Distress Oxides as well. So we're just going to have a little play, and yeah, you can see how I've been creating, you'll see how I've been creating these little swatch panels, which are really about giving me a chance to see how the inks operate under different conditions. I also just couldn't resist. These are my new PaperArtsy Coneflowers. Couldn't resist having a little bit of play with some watercolour stamping, and we'll get on hopefully to a bit of that. So what I've got at the moment is just a sheet of the fairly cheap watercolour paper that I buy in a big sketch pad. I've cut it up into 8, so each sheet gets me 8 little swatching pads. Fold in half, fold in half, fold in half, and you end up with 8 of those. And I need my craft mat, just because we're going to get a little bit inky, and I need the inks on the mat. So I've pulled out distress colours that are going to be relatively close. I mean, one of the main differences I've noticed already is, to me, these Find It inks feel like they've got sort of quite clean, bright, fresh colour tones. Whereas obviously one of my great loves with the Distress inks is the muted vintage colour palette. So if you like working in brights and fresh colours, then these are definitely going to be good for you. Of course, there are bright and fresh distress colours now with all the additions that have been made over the years to the Distress palette. So I've tried to find some inks that are similar. They're not going to be the same. Of course they're not, because one of the great joys of being a craft supply collector is that every ink is slightly different. Where should we start? Let's start with the one. Let's start with the blue. So I thought what I'd do to start with is do my Distress Oxide sample. So that's the blue of the Find It ink, and I've pulled out Faded Jeans, which is not at all going to be the same colour. Since you didn't see this happening, I'm also going to do a version with that so that you can see what happens there. But let's just first show you how I did my 5 types of test for these inks and how they play. So we're doing it for the Distress Oxides. So my first port of call was to do a little bit of ink blending, because that's something I do a lot of, as you know. So onto the top half here, I'm just blending on. See, already you've got that beautiful dusky blue of the Faded Jeans. So that's already giving me sort of a little sense of the chalky opacity, which these also have. And then what I did was just with a brush, put a little ink on here. And my first thing was to do a little bit of spattering with the ink. So a little bit over here to just get that happening. Then rinsing off the brush and spattering on just a bit of water, just to have a look at ink spatter on here. I then gave the ink on the mat a little smoosh, spritz of water, and then smooshing into it just down on the side here. So that's just getting that sense of, here's already 4. So the ink blending, sprinkle some ink, sprinkle some water, and then smooshing down into the ink. That's, oh, there's lots of lovely ink there that I don't want to waste now. So I'm gonna do just a little bit more smooshing just to pick that up. There we are. Nice. And then, of course, the final little test is that you can, of course, stamp with inks and with oxides. So that then the final port of call was to ink up the Coneflower stamp and just stamp onto here. So this is not really necessarily about swatching for colour tone, because I know the colour tones are going to be various and different. It's more about swatching to just get that different sense of how the inks play, because we like to play. And then I just took a pen to remind me, Faded Jeans, Oxide. Let's just put that. So yeah, and then set it aside to dry. Very, very simple, very, very easy. Probably closer to this blue colour is something like Salty Ocean, but I've lined that up to go with the sky blue here. I'm just going to pick up some more of that ink. So when you're swatching, it's great to have nearby maybe an art journal or some old book pages, anything like that, so that any ink that is left on the mat, you can then pick up. So the lovely chalky oxide, the delight of oxides, is this oxidization they do when they encounter water. So I'm just tempted to pop that on there. It's really interesting. The Faded Jeans, like Chipped Sapphire Distress Ink, has a sort of pinky undertone, and that's very much happening there with that Faded Jeans as well. Interesting, but a lovely soft color. So just for comparison's sake, let's do a couple more of these. So let's pull out, what should we have? Oh, let's go grey. So this is Find It grey, which is a kind of warm grey, again with a pinky undertone going on. Really nice response to the water. Really nice to smoosh with and spatter with. That was fun. So let's just compare with a little bit of Hickory Smoke, which is a beautiful soft grey that I enjoy a lot. Have I got a grey blending sponge available at the moment? It's had browns and all kinds of things on, so I'm just going to wipe it off a little bit so that I can get a truer sense of the colour. Or I could go so far as to start myself a fresh grey sponge, but I don't know who's got the time for digging out sponges. I think that'll probably give me a clean enough go at my Hickory Smoke. If it comes out very brown, we'll know. No, look, that's good hickory smoking going on there. So again, that lovely soft, smooth, chalky oxide. Let's give a little sprinkle. I'm not going to put quite as much ink on the mat this time. Little sprinkle with the ink, little spat like so, and you can see immediately how that starts to interact with the water, get you that gorgeous chalky oxidization. A little bit of straight water at this side just to see what the difference of that is. Going to do a little smoosh down on that corner. Much less ink on the mat this time, but you can see the colour of that's quite different. That's partly because there was some brown on the sponge, but I'm going to live with it, you know. It's all good. It's playtime, it's exploring, and for the effect of those inks, I'm enjoying it nonetheless. So little bit of inking up of the stamp, and down it goes. So yeah, this is again going to be a cooler hickory smoke. I might need to go again with a clean brush, and you'll see how much difference it's going to make to the colour tone. Let's do that. So when you're swatching and playing, it's just bearing in mind what your target is, what your goal is in terms of what you're exploring. I want on this one to have another little go with a little bit of spatter, because I want to see some sort of straight spatter of that ink just hitting the blank part, and I did do that quite often with these as well as I was going. So if my goal is to have an accurate colour swatch, that's one thing. If my goal is just to be playing with the ink and seeing what the effects are, seeing how it travels and how it moves, that's a different kind of purpose. I do want to give this hickory smoke a chance to really be hickory smoke, so I am going to grab myself a cleaner or greyer blending sponge for that purpose. There we go, fresh sponge, and let's just have a look at hickory smoke as a straight comparison. Apologies that I'm a little bit croaky today. It's not I think a cold. I think it's a hay fevery kind of response to something that's definitely letting out pollen at the moment. So there we are. That as you can see straight away is giving us a different ink tone. So just notice, I really like that colour because it's sort of heading towards pumice stone. So noticing that a clean sponge is something to just bear in mind if you want to make sure you're getting pure colour. I mean, I very rarely am that bothered if I've got a colour going on that is not quite what I'm after, because I enjoy the randomness of that, the unexpectedness of allowing colours to mix and blend as you go. So there's a little smoosh. A little more water on the mat will get you that different kind of smoosh where you're getting solid colour, but I'm quite enjoying the splats because, as you know, I do love an ink splotch. Let's, while that's still slightly inked up from the last time, pop down our stamping. That is definitely truer to a hickory smoke colour. But I'm going to want to recreate this colour at some point. That's interesting. That's sort of somewhere in between those two. Enjoying that quite a lot. Right, let's just pop down what we've got here. Hickory smoke. Ox. Just so I've got a reminder. Always wise to do that straight away, because you think you're going to remember. And then when push comes to shove, you look at it and you go, was that hickory smoke? Yes it is. Grand. So again, just as a comparison, what might be quite nice is for those of you who don't spend all your time getting inky, maybe you'd like to see a comparison between the Hickory Smoke Oxide and the Hickory Smoke Distress Ink. So oxides, smoky, chalky, opacity, and this lovely sort of effect when you give them a sprinkle with water where they become even more oxidized. Distress inks, translucent, whole different sort of kettle of fish, really. And yeah, for that I am going to want another sponge. So here are my sponges, kept on a little grid printed from the Ranger site. You can print out this grid, and then I've just put halves of little Velcro tabs on those so that the sponges can go on and off. As you'll know, I often don't switch in and out my sponges. I have sort of one sponge that does all my blues, one sponge that does all my greys, but what I do try to make sure I do is not use the same sponge for inks and for oxides, because that does make a difference. If you've got chalky oxide going on a sponge and then you use it for a distress ink, you are going to make your transparent, translucent distress ink mix with that chalky opacity, and the chalkiness will always win. If you're interested in more detail about the differences between ink and oxide, there is a whole video on that where I talk about those differences. I will link that, as always, in the description below so that you can go straight there. So here's my translucent ink, and of course it's going over white paper, so at the moment you can't necessarily tell about its translucence. When I start to play a little bit, you'll start to see some slightly different effects and impacts. So step one, a little bit of spattering with this ink, then a little bit of spattering with just some water, and yes, that ink is going to move and it's going to shift with that wateriness, but you can see it takes a little bit longer, and it's also probably going to require a little bit of lifting, that spritz and flick technique where we then use a bit of kitchen towel to lift the ink away, but it's still doing a lovely movement thing. But look at the difference of how that ink is in the smooshing from the oxide. And then again, let's have a look at the Find It Oxide. So it's not that one is better or worse than another. They each have slightly different effects. So for me, it's lovely to have all of them in my collection, and be able to apply a different ink or a different color tone or a slightly different way of playing, slightly different movement of those inks. Hickory Smoke's a lovely subtle grey. I'm enjoying that on the page quite a lot. Might, as I did before, put just a little extra bit of straight spatter through the middle here, just so I can see that. And then right down, Hickory Smoke. Oops, straight through the wet patch ink. There we go. So I am going to, although I didn't do this with the others, so it's not quite a fair comparison, I'm just going to do a little bit of lifting of whatever's still dry there, wet there, beg your pardon. So we've now got 3 going on there. That's the grey Find It Oxide, that's the Distress Oxide, that's the Distress Ink. 3 slightly different greys going on. Do love a bit of grey. Should we have some turquoise? Just another little go. Some turquoise and maybe some green. Let's see. So Jade, this is one of the ones where I thought, oh, look at this amazing colour that's going on. And then it turned out that on the inside, unfortunately, for me, because I love this, but also fortunately, because it's also a lovely kind of turquoise emerald green sea affair. So this is the Jade in the Find It ink. I'm going to give that a go with some peacock feathers, because I think that's probably a close-ish comparison. Let's get that down onto there. Oh, look, blending first. Not paying attention. Let's see what we've got in terms of sponges. You'll do. So where's it gone? Where did I just put it? There we go. Peacock feathers, oxide. Just going on, lovely smooth blend. Oh, I should probably do one so that you can actually see that peacock feathers going on, because it does apply slightly differently, and it's fair to let you have a look at that. So spritzing on some ink, splattering on some ink, splattering on some water, just to let that react. Maybe add a little bit of water on the mat here to smoosh into, pick up some of those ink spots. Ooh, that's nice, look at that. Such a rich colour, really highly pigmented, lots going on. Where's my flower? Let's give that a little go. I mean, in colour tone, that's quite similar, but this has got much more green going on in it, the peacock feathers. perhaps Mermaid Lagoon might be somewhere between those two. But as I say, it's lovely to have that rainbow range of colours going on. Definitely worth experimenting with these new inks, particularly if you're, as I say, in Europe and able to get hold of them. So let's give you a shot at seeing the actual Find It ink doing its job. La la la. Let's pop a bit of Find It ink onto the mat and do a little bit of ink blending to start with. I don't need to keep both of these, obviously, in the long run. Yeah, see, I don't really want to start a whole new sponge, so I'm just going to clean off a little bit of that peacock feathers, like so, and then ink up, make sure I get a good inking of the jade to go onto here. So yeah, you can see that's a different colour tone, but also applying quite nicely. Goes down on like that. Let's do a little spatter with the ink onto here. And then cleaning the brush, little spatter of water onto there. Let's do a little smoosh down into it, like so. That's nice. And then a little stamping over here. So as you can see, it's an alternate product for those who are in Europe. We are I am a slave to Distress. I'm not gonna lie. I love the Distress palette. I love how the inks play, but just sometimes the ordering from the US can be tricky. I'm stuck in the middle of Central Europe, and so ordering from craft stores in my own country is really not a thing. There's very little in the way of craft supplies here in the Czech Republic. Ordering these days from the UK, where I used to live, you are subject to all kinds of additional taxes, which is right, you know, the things have travelled across the Atlantic, la 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 la. So I do sometimes order direct from the US. Let's just remember what this is. Jade, Find It. I'm just going to put FI. There we go. And this is, see, this is why you have to do it straight away. Peacock feathers. So having access to a European product it just makes a change. It's really interesting. Clearly I applied more ink depth with this second go. This is Jade and this is Jade. So I had more ink on the sponge, so you're getting that darker tone. That's worth bearing in mind, how much difference that can make. And there, just look at that chalky oxidization on that. So again, for comparison's sake, let's do one with the Distress ink. That does need a different sponge, because as I said, I don't want oxide ink going down when I'm doing a translucent Distress ink. So the colour tone is actually more similar to the Jade, isn't it, than it is to its own oxide. Beautiful colour, lovely. So that Peacock Feathers Oxide does have that greenish tone that is really rather interesting, and that I would consider to be Jade. But you know, colours are colours, and colours are a very personal matter, aren't they? The colours that make our hearts sing are often different from the colours that make other people's hearts sing, and that's as it should be, because we should all be individual. So I just picked up a little bit of that, as you saw, because when you're working with Distress ink, you don't get oxidization, but what you can get is that lovely lift back to the paper. But that translucence is really making me rather happy on there. And I am, overall, I'm probably in favour of translucence over chalky oxides. If I could only have either inks or oxides for the rest of my life, I'd probably go inks rather than oxides. I know some people are deeply wedded to oxide inks, and of course they're gorgeous to play with. But if I had to choose between them, my choice would go with Distress Inks, because I just love the translucent look at them. I guess because maybe it's closer to watercolours, for which of course I have a deep love. So this is Peacock Feathers ink. There we go. Nice. Might put a little bit more of that inky spatter just at the top here, just for fun, just because I can, and because I'm enjoying seeing how those inks interact and play. So there we've got the Jade Find It ink, Peacock Feathers Oxide, Distress Oxide, Peacock Feathers Distress ink, and again just that lovely inky playtime. This is the best way to get to know your supplies. I mean, yes, I'm delighted to have your company watching on the channel here so that you can sort of get a look at what's what, but the very best way to discover things about your supplies and what they can get up to is to have your own playtime, is to do a little bit of exploring. I need to do one more, and I'm thinking I'd quite like to see, so this is the Spring Green, which is a beautiful, fresh, bright spring green. I absolutely love it. And of course, there's a favourite of mine, the Mowed Lawn, which I might just pop down to do a little bit of comparison, just for my own curiosity. So I'm going to put a little bit on the mat there. I'm going to start with a bit of inking, just blending that colour on. Oh, it's so vivid. Really sort of teeth zingingly fresh, that colour. So a little bit of spatter with ink on the brush, clean off the brush, a little bit of spatter with just some water, let that do some work, have a little smoosh into what's on the mat. Might do another little spritz. Gorgeous. So again, this is really not a video about going, oh, this one's better, or oh, you must buy this. It's about playing, exploring, experimenting. So the only thing I'm really recommending here is that you take your products out for a ride, and something as simple as swatching can be really revelatory. You can really discover so much, but it's also just deeply satisfying to build up this little collection. Pick a favourite stamp. Obviously at the moment I'm obsessed with what's newest, because we're like that as well, aren't we? Of course we have favourites that we return to, but playing with what's new is quite exciting, and I've really enjoyed seeing this coneflower turn up in all these different colours. Mowed Lawn Oxide, Mowed Lawn Ox, there we are. And play. This video is all it's selling you is the idea of playing, of taking your products out for a spin, even if you've only got the time to do a couple of little swatches. And then these, of course, can be used as elements in journaling pages. You could use them to build tags around, and just knowing what your products can get up to. Lovely oxidization going on there, and you can see it's nice to have both those colours in the stash. I'm sorry, but it is. And yes, I've been lucky enough to have these sent to me, as I say, by the HobbyStudio. But next time you've got a birthday wish list or a Christmas list, you might want to think about investing in some more colours for your palette. Thanks so much for your company today. If you've got comments or questions, do leave those down below. I will, of course, dive in for a close-up so you can have a look at some more of these textures and a few more of these. I may even do myself a couple more comparison swatches. For instance, this, I think the scattered straw might be quite fun to have a look at, just to see how that goes with the yellow. I might do a couple more of those before I do the close-up. But that's how you can apply ink in 5 different ways on one small bit of paper. Stamping, ink blending, spattering with ink, spattering with water, smooshing down in the mat, and just seeing what kinds of different effects and different possibilities there are in the products that you own. Thanks so much for your company. and happy crafting all.